Sorry, just quickly, there was a representative from.
I will now call to order a special council meeting on Monday, May 17th, 2021 at 6 p.m. Attendance, I note that all members of council are in attendance with, I think, the exception of Councillor Acquaculture, who may join us in progress. So thank you, council. This is a bit of an unusual situation. I don't know whether this is a world's record, but this might be the first time we've met after an election without knowing what's going on. So we'll do the best we can. Approval of the agenda. I would look for a motion to approve the agenda as written.
I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. And a seconder?
I'll move, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. And all in favor of approving the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. We'll just go to self-disclosure of conflict of interest on any matter. Hearing none, we'll move
Your
on.
Worship, Councillor Gumichel here. I'm going to declare conflict on E3, so I'll recuse myself at that time.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gumichel. Sorry, I didn't pick up on that right away. I'll leave that to you to do at the right time. We'll now move to presentations, and we do have a presentation this evening, which we have requested from Cooke Aquaculture concerning their possible installation, in Bayside. So I will turn it over to the representatives from Cooke Aquaculture. Thank you, and thank you very much for presenting to us tonight.
Great. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Greatly appreciate the opportunity to come and present to you and your council tonight, and appreciate your CAO's request for us to come and give a presentation. We certainly appreciate that. My name is Joel Richardson. I'm the Vice President of Public Relations for Cooke Aquaculture, and there's two other representatives that are going to join me tonight, Your Worship, to give this presentation. Mark Sorensen, the principal for Sorensen Engineering, a local engineering firm that's been working with us on these wells project for a potential post-smolt facility in the Bayside Industrial Park. And also Doug Craig from Craig Hydrogeologic, who has been working with us as well on the technical side of the water sourcing for this particular proposed project. If you don't mind, Your Worship, I'm going to share my screen and pull up a slide deck, and then I'll walk through the first three slides, and then I'm going to turn it over, Your Worship, to Mark and Doug to walk council through the technical aspects of the presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
So, Your Worship, essentially what we're looking for here, we've been working, when I was speaking with the CAO, he had asked to give a little bit of background about this project. And for the last almost 4 years, Cooke Aquaculture and our local subsidiary, Kelly Cove Salmon, has been working on the development of a potential new land-based post-smolt facility for the industrial park down in Bayside. We've been looking at a variety of different parcels of land in different locations, and we've since acquired a parcel of property just on the road, right on the water side of this, near the industrial, right in the industrial park, actually industrial zone land. The challenge that we've had with this specific property is looking for additional water supply. And our folks that we're going to be presenting tonight, both Mark and Doug, will kind of walk you through the proposed area where we're looking at drilling some additional wells. We've been dealing with a Department of Environment and local government for the last number of years on this. And just to be clear, we haven't, because this is a proposed facility, we haven't actually registered for full EIA at this point in time, because we're just sort of still going through the water sourcing. So we had requested that the Department of Environment, local government grant us an exemption to be able just to do these wells, which we're using for testing, but to find out whether the water is even available in the quantity that we would need to build a facility of this scale down in the industrial park area. So The facility itself is actually a post-smolt facility, and we've just been approved to build one of these facilities over in Centerville on the Digby Neck side of the Bay of Fundy, and we're looking at doing one in New Brunswick as well. I'll just sort of walk you through a couple of key components. The proposed facility itself is about a $30+ million project to be constructed. The idea here is that we would actually grow our salmon larger on land prior to transferring to our ocean pens. So when they're transferred larger on land, it allows the salmon to be stronger, more resilient, and have a much better growing cycle and a shorter growing cycle in the ocean. So a lot of places around the world are moving to a more kind of hybrid system where you grow the fish longer on land before transferring them to the ocean. This facility, as it's proposed today, would utilize the most advanced recirculating aquaculture technology available. We've been working with some world leaders in this particular area for the last number of years, just looking at different technologies available and engineering one that would be suitable for this particular site. If this facility is to be built, we would require approximately 15 full-time year-round employees to operate the facility. They would be new hires to the company locally in the industrial park. So what we have before you and what was sent to the town, to the CAO from the Department of Environment, is a drafted approval of an exemption to drill up to 3 additional production wells and then 2 observation wells. So we would want to drill those on current RDC property. This is property that's owned by the province. It's zoned industrial. And we had previously drilled 2 wells just south of where these other 5 wells would be. Unfortunately, they didn't produce the amount of water that we were looking for this recirculating aquaculture facility. So working with our engineers, we've identified a piece of ground just a little farther north on the RDC property within the Champlain Watershed that we believe would be good to do the drilling and the testing. We would also perform pump tests to determine whether the groundwater source obviously is of a sustainable nature to be able to produce. This is just a conceptual drawing of what the Bayside post-smolt facility could look like. Obviously, again, we're early in our design stages of the facility, but this is also quite similar to the facility that we would be building over in Digby in Centerville, fairly similar in terms of scale. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Mark now. And Mark, if you'd like, I can just flip through the slides as we share the screen.
Sure. So it's Mark Sorensen here, and I'm here with Lionel Hayter. We're both St. Andrews residents and work out of our office down on Water Street. On the screen, the proposed project site is in the bottom left-hand side of the drawing that's hatched in black. And it's outside the watershed, I guess, in the industrial park. And the proposed drilling targets are in the red hatched area. So the concept is that the water could be piped from this red hatched area down to the project site in the industrial park. Facilities like this have intensive water recycling systems, which continuously clean and reuse the water. So it's important that the supplied water is the best possible quality and as consistent as possible. Surface water like that from Cooke can have variable quality and temperature. And it also has the risk of carrying bacteria and viruses that could negatively impact this facility. For these reasons, groundwater is always the preferred source for these types of facilities. And I guess the geology at the project site is volcanic, which is not very productive for groundwater. We've drilled wells on site and feel that any further development has to be done, I guess, in an area that has more kind of geological potential, I guess you could say. So the proposed wells, as we're showing here up in red, are in sandstone. And as opposed to the volcanic material on site, it's generally more productive, especially on the peninsula. So Joel, if you could go to the Next slide. The two wells here in the middle are the two that Joel mentioned. No, the next two up, Joel, are the two that have already been drilled. The well on the right was into sandstone, and so this is the area that we're concentrating or proposing to concentrate our efforts, right, for these future wells. The new production wells will all be spaced about 100 meters apart. And then our proposed monitoring wells are between the production wells and the residents. So I shouldn't say residents, like the neighbors. So any impact, I guess, we would see closer to the wells before it started to impact the neighbors. There's established scientific methods for determining the sustainable withdrawal from groundwater sources. And these methods are conservative and include monitoring for surface water infiltration. So if for some reason surface water starts to make it into our wells, we'll know, right? And because these wells are located in the watershed and they'll serve a critical role with Cooke, the testing for them will be quite extensive. So we're certainly going to go above and beyond with the testing. And it's just kind of a final note is just a reminder, I guess, that the exemption that's before you is for the well drilling and testing only. It'll only establish what the sustainable withdrawal is, but not approve it. So I guess that's what I had for those two slides. Joel, if you wanted to go on.
Sure. Okay. Doug, are you there?
Yep. Hello, everyone. What I'll present is essentially just a little bit of history. The water from the watershed has been shared for decades. The hydraulic data on the following slides has been taken from a 2014 Stantec report on Champlain Lake watershed. It was commissioned by the town. Overall, what we want to look at is that people have been using water for quite some time from this watershed. There's a lot of water within the watershed, particularly in both surface water and groundwater. And the amount of groundwater we will be looking at is quite, I'm not sure what the word would be, minuscule in terms of the total amount of water within the watershed. This is the historical allotment from the provincial government, which was prior to the time of the 2014 Stantec report. And this was just the allotments. You can see 690 IGPM, imperial gallons per minute for St. Andrews, the industrial park at 840, the Atlantic Salmon Federation at 1507, and you can read the others, but the total is 4,200 imperial gallons per minute. The Stantec report estimated that the total volume of water within the lake was 8.9 billion gallons. So in terms of the overall water usage from the watershed, even the total water usage, it seems to be quite small. And if we could go to the next slide, please. The average hydraulic characteristics of the watershed, again, taken from the 2014 Stantec report. An area of 24.7 kilometers, average precipitation 1.43 meters per year. Evapotranspiration, that's the evaporation from surface water, from the surface of the lake and from plants, averages out to 0.53 meters per year, which leaves 0.9 meters of water available per square meter of area per year. And that's available for both surface water runoff, i.e. the lake and the streams, and infiltrating into groundwater. And that is an estimated total of about 22 million cubic meters per year, or on average 70.5 cubic meters per second of available water in the watershed. There's no way you can use all that, but it is a lot of water. what is currently estimated for the freshwater flow for the aquaculture facility is approximately 0.0069 cubic meters per second or 91 IGPM. And this is just a ballpark figure, but that represents just under 1/100th of 1% of the average flow in the watershed, surface and groundwater. So it's a very small proportion. As I said, the estimate on the average required freshwater flow is just a design number now. It may change somewhat, but it does represent what we're in the ballpark looking for. The next slide, please. Okay, the historical allotments. What I've done in this slide, it's the same thing. It's the same data as in the previous slides, but I've changed it all into cubic meters per second so we can compare the numbers. Total water available in the watershed, 70.5 cubic meters per second. You see the town of St. Andrews down there at 0.052, the industrial park at 0.63. These are the allotment numbers. If you remember what my previous number was for in terms of the groundwater required for freshwater for the aquaculture facility, it's a very small overall component. And if I could have the next slide, please. This again from the Stantec 2014 report. The estimated actual water use of that time of the various water users, the people that had allotments, out of the total for the watershed, 70.5 cubic meters per second. The point being, if you look down at the total at the bottom of the estimated actual water use, it's 0.24 compared to 70.5. Again, all the water being used is a small proportion for the watershed. That includes both surface and groundwater. And just to emphasize, we are looking to take water from the groundwater table with wells, not to extract water directly from the lake. So I think the point to take away is what Cooke's is looking for is a very small proportion of the available water and from the groundwater system. So it will not discernibly, measurably, noticeably affect the surface water flows in the watershed. Okay, that. And if you could proceed on, I think that's it for me.
That's great. Thanks, Doug. So your worship, I'll just kind of wrap up our side of the presentation, maybe in a few bullet points. As I mentioned earlier at the start, a Department of Environment and Local Government had sent your town administrator a letter along with the draft exemption approval, inviting comments from the town on the proposed wells. We do wish to drill those production and monitoring wells. We have a goal. Hopefully we can secure a freshwater source to help supply the facility. If the wells do prove viable for water quality and quantity, we would be required to register for an environmental impact assessment. We would also certainly do community and First Nations consultations as part of that environmental impact assessment before we would advance on the actual facility construction. Just to say once again, thank you very much, Your Worship and Council, for having us come tonight, and we welcome your questions and comments to our team. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, we were going to move on to a discussion, but I think we'll just move on to the discussion right now since we have these gentlemen with us and they've offered to answer questions. So I'm going to open it up to council and ask members of the council if they have any questions.
I will ask a question, if you don't mind, Mayor.
No, go right ahead.
From the statistics in the presentation, it looks like there's lots of water out there. The groundwater source for the residents who live around that area, would that impact them any at all for their wells?
Doug, could you respond to that, if you don't mind?
Yes, I will. We have to obtain what is called a water source approval from the Department of Environment. And part of the testing that was described earlier, where we do pump tests and use the observation wells, which are between the pump test wells and the existing residential wells in that area. that will be designed to determine how big a potential impact we might have on those wells. And the bottom line is that we are not allowed to take other people's water. We cannot have a significant impact on the existing residential wells in the area. And we will have to maintain groundwater observation or monitoring wells to demonstrate that to the Department of the Environment. And they will require yearly reporting on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, your worship.
Yes, Deputy Mayor. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess before I commence, just a couple of comments on Cooks. First of all, we're very fortunate to have you in our region. A company like Cooks that's growing globally at the rate that you are. It's truly impressive, and you're a major employer, and we certainly appreciate it. And that doesn't even go to say all the charity and community work you do as well. You know, too many to name, but whether it be someone flooding, I see, you know, you use your boats to assist them, or you know, things like the fireworks in St. George that everyone loves. The list goes on and on, but we certainly appreciate you being in the community, and expanding and offering more jobs is something that I certainly like to support. The thing that we're balancing out here is the fact that we only have one water source. This is the only water source for the town of St. Andrews. So as such, this is something that we have to make sure that we all do due diligence on, to make sure that, you know, we don't just see a presentation, say, go for it, and making sure that we know exactly what all the impacts are. So I appreciate the information tonight. So I guess my question is, you know, and elections happen. I know you tried to reach out to us before then, but really we're in what's called lame duck mode, which means that as a town council, we're not supposed to be enacting any bylaws. We're not supposed to be approving any budgetary items outside of our annual budget. The spirit of that from the provincial government is that we make no major decisions for our community right now. And, you know, my phone did ring when people saw this, and they thought that this was a major decision when we're on the way out the door right now. So I guess my question for that is I was fortunate to see a presentation in February of 2019 on this with Councillor Gumashall. The question is, why right now, when literally next week, the vote's already happened, that we won't, some of us will not be in this chair?
Yeah, so thank you, Deputy Mayor. I can speak to that. The project is actually something, as I mentioned earlier, we've literally been working on this with the Department of Environment for, I think, almost going on 4 years now. We did a meeting, as you mentioned, that you and Councillor Gumashall had attended back in February 2019. Since then, it literally has taken us the last couple of years working with the department to get to the point where we could get the approval granted from them. And we had a lot of engineering work that was required to be done by Sorensen Engineering, and Doug Craig also did quite a bit of work for us over the last little while. At that meeting in February, it was actually yourself and the other councillor were the two that said, you guys need to come back to the town and give a presentation because you know, we had the stakeholders there in the Champlain Lake Watershed group, the LSD and others, but literally it's taken us this long just to get back to the town with all the appropriate documentation to show that there would be, as Doug said, minuscule impacts on the town's water source, but also the other users of the area. So the only reason why we're here is because the province did send a letter back in April to the town requesting comment on our approved granted exemption. So we felt it important. I reached back out to Chris, to the CAO, and just simply said, look, we're aware that the province has asked you for comment. The council is not being asked to make a formal decision. It's not, you're not being asked to approve these wells because they are obviously outside, but you know, they are in the watershed. So as a matter of process, we felt as a courtesy, it was important for us to come back now that you had the full package from the province and we're being asked to comment, that we'd follow up on the request to come and give your council a formal presentation with all the appropriate technical information. So it was really just a matter of timing. The fact that there was election for us was kind of coincidental more than anything, but we do want to move forward. We'd like to get the wells drilled, figure out whether the water is there. If the water is there, then certainly we would come back. We have to go back to the province, and then we would apply for the full EIA. We would also come back to the town. And in addition, we understand that the town is looking at doing some of your own well field work. And, you know, we'd be happy to share the findings of what we find in those wells back with the town as well, so that the town has a kind of a full picture of what may be available kind of in the upper parts above the lake as well. So, you know, we have no issue with that, and we're happy to share that information as we move ahead. We're still a long ways away from a full engineering and design work of the facility, but we really can't move ahead at all with any of that until we have an understanding of whether there's even the water quantity and quantity available, Your Worship and Council.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else want to?
Councillor Greer, Your Worship.
Councillor Grew?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Councillor Greer.
Thank you. I think one of the things that should be mentioned or identified at this juncture is that the province has initiated municipal reform, well, a fairly substantial document, and that could potentially redefine the boundaries of the town of St. Andrews, which may or may not include the area that is under consideration right now. So it's very difficult at this juncture for us to figure out what is the role of the town of St. Andrews right now and what is the role going to be in the future, because our role potentially could change dramatically over the next 7 or 8 months. So I'm not sure how we deal with this at this point, and how we sort of address that kind of uncertainty. So it's something to keep in mind that the ground is shifting beneath our feet right now. And the province has indicated with some certainty that they want to move from 340 municipal entities to less than 50. So some amalgamation of some sort is going to take place. We don't know what just yet. Thank you.
Your Worship, if you don't mind, I could respond a little bit to that. I guess from our perspective, whether the boundaries of the town changed or not, the project and the ask that we have in the draft approval that's been granted by the province that the town is being asked to comment on, from our perspective, that exemption approval would not change, nor would what we're looking for change in terms of the wells and the testing that would be required, regardless of who the municipal authority would be for the Bayside LSD, as it currently is, where that RDC property is, the industrial park property that we'd like to do the wells on. We would make essentially the same ask, regardless of who was there. We simply certainly wanted to make sure that the town had every opportunity, given that you were asked by the province to provide comment. We wanted to make sure that you got a chance to have our engineers and Doug as a hydrogeologist be able to explain it so that your council is fully aware.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Your Worship.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I just got a couple more since we have this opportunity, which I certainly appreciate. DELG said basically for you guys to consult with us. Was there any previous decisions made by them leading up to this over the last couple of years, or was this they're just still waiting to make an official decision on it?
Well, we do have the approved granted exemption for the drilling now as it stands, and we have looked at the legislation for the usage. So an aquaculture facility is approved within to be able to do extraction. So we did take the time. We've been back and forth with environment for a while on that, but there are terms and conditions which we're happy to comply with, obviously, to be able to have a road extended in there, and we've got remediation work and other things. We can't store, like a gas generator on site or anything like that. So we did 2 previous wells, as Mark had alluded to, Deputy Mayor, wells 8 and 9, which are also on. So what we did was we drilled those 2 wells first, and the province gave us permission to do that. That was done a couple of years ago. We then followed through and did 24-hour and 72-hour pump tests on those wells. And they said that basically we're not going to grant the other wells, those other 3 or 5, I guess, the 2 production and the 2 observation wells, until you can show us that there's not enough water in the other 2 wells. So that was our hope, but unfortunately they did not produce the quantity of water that we needed. It was quite insufficient. So we went back to the province after we provided them with the technical information about wells 8 and 9, and then had to do some more engineering work with Sorensen and Doug Craig to be able to show the engineering work that could be done for those other 5 wells that we're bringing to you here today. So it literally is just simply taken time, because there's been a lot of energy and resources spent to with the province basically to demonstrate that we could do these and engineer the roads and whatnot in to be able to do them. So.
Okay, and just for my understanding, like obviously I'm familiar with municipal water, but maybe not wells outside of the lake as much. So I understand the amount of water that you need for this project, but is there a check and balance in place where someone comes in and audits how much flow has been through there? Or is it a situation where if it was double once you have these drilled, it's really almost a trust thing? I'm just not sure how it works with wells.
Well, maybe what I could do is I could ask Mark to speak on that. Mark really is our engineering expert working on the project and has designed these all around the world. So Mark, do you mind speaking to that, please?
You're in.
Sure, thanks, Joel. Deputy Mayor Henderson, I guess each of these land-based facilities will get what's called an approval to operate from the province, which will identify how much water they can withdraw from the different sources. And they'll also have to have a groundwater monitoring plan, which will, I think, what's the report called?
Yeah, there's an annual groundwater monitoring report that's essentially includes the water level data in the wells to see how the withdrawal is affecting the aquifer. And in addition, from each well, there needs to be continuous logging of the volume extracted. So that can be in, daily volume extracted or more frequently it's meters cubed per hour. And that's all logged and submitted as part of that annual report.
And the water level in each well is continuously logged, as well as the monitoring. So it's, it's in Cooke's interest that they not take more water than it's available as well, right? This is a pretty big investment, and it has to be done in a sustainable way.
If I could just add to that, as Doug Craig showed earlier in the previous allotments, the previous Atlantic Salmon Federation facility that was located on the lake was a flow-through facility. This is not a flow-through facility, so water's not coming in one side and just going through the tanks and out the other side. This is a very high-tech, state-of-the-art recirculating aquaculture facility. So water is reused, filtered within the facility itself, so that there's very little water discharge and water usage overall, which is why the water needs are much lower than a flow-through facility.
Perfect. And through your worship, I had some questions for staff, but I was wondering if that made more sense to hold off till after the presentation.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll have a bit of a discussion. Okay, anybody else have questions for our presenters?
If you don't mind, your worship, can I ask a couple of 3 questions?
You certainly can, Mr. Spear.
So, Mr. Richardson, I guess the first question, is there any circumstances where you would look at doing the surface water, or right now that's completely and utterly off the table, no matter what technology you could find to treat it before putting it into the facility?
Well, I mean, again, maybe I'll let Mark speak to that, but initially, I mean, as was alluded to earlier, as indicated earlier, groundwater is always the preferred source from a number of different reasons. It's way better for the fish in terms of a lot less contaminants in the water that could have a biological impact on raising fish. But we know that the Champlain Industrial Park has allocation available, but would require additional treatment and other things. So maybe Mark, do you mind just speaking to that a little bit?
Well, I guess to keep it short, Chris, at this point in the project, I don't think we can rule anything out. You know, I think if the wells don't work, then you know, I think certainly we'll consider surface water, and you know, that would have to be done in a sustainable way as well. Like the the volume wouldn't necessarily change. It would stay low, even related to the industrial park allotment, the historical. You know, it would certainly use less than the Tootum plant used to use, for example. Um, you know, and I guess we're doing our best to avoid that.
No, no, that's appreciated. So those tables you had earlier that talked about the allotment for the facility was assuming the wells though, correct? So that would change to whatever it was if you have to go down that, like when Mr. Craig was talking about so much would be coming to the facility out of the allotment. That was basically assuming.
Yeah. So just to be clear, like the allotments that are there are kind of historical, and the more recent data from the park, which, you know, they can, I guess the last time we checked would have been 2 years ago, they were significantly less than their allotment. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was, I'm sure it was less than half that they were using out of their allotment. So you know, the use of the industrial park right now is much lower than it historically has been.
Appreciate it. For the Stantec report, was that authorized by you folks or was it actually carried out by the department?
It was the town of St. Andrews, I believe.
ETF grant. And then, okay.
There's a copy in the library, Chris, if there's not one there.
Well, it's not, if it's the one I'm thinking, yeah, we have a copy. It's a few years old now, but if that's the one. Just a couple of things I'll touch on too. In regards to the Wells project, Mr. Richardson had talked about earlier that the town was doing some well field exploration. That's not quite right. What happened is we got a grant to do some studies on alternate sources, which would be lakes higher up in the watershed and not a well field. We've been told in the past that there isn't sufficient water enough to satisfy the town of St. Andrews. So for any that might be listening, thinking that we're doing that type of work right now, we're not. May come someday, but if you share the data, it's always appreciated because more data is science, and we can look at it, do the math, and say, nope, not going to be able to do it. And if possible, we wouldn't mind getting a copy of the slides just for our file, specifically some of the data that was there and the allotments and stuff would be good. But it's all summarized and stuff. If you guys don't mind firing off a copy to me or Paul at a later time, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. I think a copy was sent to Paul earlier today, so you should have a copy. So, yeah.
Okay, he does. Okay, great.
No problem.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Anyone else have a question? Perhaps I could just ask one quick one. This is just a follow up on what Deputy Mayor Henderson said and Councillor Bruce said. We are a bit of a lame duck council for another week or so until we find out who's going to be sitting at the table after the 25th of May. I would take it that not much is going to happen in 5 days, but I'm suggesting that I can't preempt what we might discuss a little bit later here tonight, but I can certainly imagine that some of the discussion will be focused around, you know, can we wait until the new council is duly sworn in and gets their feet under them before we respond to the Department of the Environment about this matter, and how does that affect your progress? Obviously, you're anxious to get going in this, and we fully understand that. I certainly concur with Deputy Mayor Henderson's comments. I mean, we're all big believers in Cooke Aquaculture, and we understand what you achieved as an organization on almost a worldwide basis now. But at the end of the day, our first obligation is to the taxpayers of St. Andrews, and to make sure that nothing that we have going on would be possibly jeopardized by anything that you might do there that we would have not done our due diligence on, as was mentioned earlier. So I guess I'll just leave that with you, and thank you very much for coming here, because, you know, right now I tend to agree with what Councillor Brew has just said, that we're probably going to get some significant changes here. And I think that's probably a good thing for the province of New Brunswick, but we don't now know what they will be. And I'm very heartened to hear you say that it doesn't matter, that your project is your project and you'll consult with whoever you need to consult with in order to make this thing okay for everybody that's involved or affected by it. So I think that's the right message for us to take back to our constituents. So I want to thank you very much for coming this evening and presenting, and we'll go away and do a little bit of discussion here in the next little while, and we'll have Mr. Spear get back to you with where we're at as quickly as possible.
Look, thank you very much, Mayor Nash, Deputy Mayor Henderson, and members of council and city staff. We really appreciate our town staff. We really appreciate the opportunity to come and present the Wells project to you today. As I mentioned earlier, at this time, we are just looking for a comment from the town back to Department of Environment, local government. In the meantime, if staff, your worship, have any questions or comments they'd like to provide to us or need clarity following your council meeting, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out. We're more than happy to provide any additional information that may be helpful. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone from the True North Salmon for taking the time.
Go ahead here.
Let's see.
Your worship, you can proceed with your introductions, consideration of passing of bylaws, and if you wish to continue discussion with council.
Thank you, Mr. Knopper. So we will proceed further and just, in fact, continue the discussion that we've already started, I suppose, now that some of our questions at least have been answered.
Your worship, just one question. I do have a member of the public on that has a question about this particular topic. Do you want to wait till question period or have it brought forward to council?
I think we should have our internal discussion first before we go forward. Sorry for the delay, but if we get started, we won't get stopped on questions at that point from the public.
Your worship, can I just talk to it for a brief moment just to try to get the conversation
Absolutely.
focused? Thank you, worship. So council, what you have to understand, what you're really being asked for tonight isn't to give the blanket okay to the project. It's not even to say you think it's a grand idea. All you're being asked about is to okay the continued evaluation of these wells to determine if they can even be used for the project. I think it's important that we supply answer sooner rather than later, because as we know, everything's out in the LSD, and really I supplied a comment back to the department earlier that said because of the short-term nature of this project, the short-term turnaround of getting an answer back to you, council, has no comment, but then they've kind of put a little bit of a hold on it in order to do this process tonight. But I feel if we don't at least try to cooperate and provide at least some type of questions, and it's totally up to you, but I think as long as we're going to be partners, we should have some type of comment instead of just no comment or passing it on to the future council who could take, a few weeks to get it around. But I think it's important that you supply some type of answer from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. Council?
Yeah, your worship.
Yeah.
I was wondering from a staff perspective, what conversations we've had directly with the province, and have we been given assurance by the Minister of Environment that anything throughout this process, whether it be testing, whether it be the next step, have we got our reassurances that if anything should go awry, that they will shut down the activity right away?
So there's a couple of things to say there. Number one, I mean, it is the position of the Department of Environment, like it is for a watershed. If things go awry, they're supposed to address it because it's a bigger problem for them if they lose the water source for the town of St. Andrews or the water source for local residents and stuff. But there's a lot to be said about their the process that they've gone through this. So I personally was under the belief that this project, because of the problems with the water source, had died a quiet death a couple of years ago. But then I found out that it was going on. So I contacted the department and then they said, yeah, you guys need to be part of the process. And so they've put us in touch with the proponents and have been keeping us up to date what's going on. And so the fact that I went back, no comment, and they kind of put a halt until we had this meeting tonight shows that they have some faith in the town and its opinion in moving forward as a partner, as opposed to just doing it gratuitously, if you will. But again, they're going to look at the best interest of the whole population because, again, it's not just our water source. If these aquifer is drawing from several homes in the area or more, it could, for the LSDs, could be a major problem for their residents as well.
And through your worship, if I could just do the follow-up, that's perfect segue to the follow-up question is, obviously we have the Cooke Watershed Landowners Association, which I believe we're a member of as a major stakeholder. I was wondering if the municipality has engaged with the LSDs or the Landowners Association over the last year to make sure that we're not overstepping, meaning that I wouldn't want the Cooke Landowners Association to say, go ahead and do that to do something to the lake without consulting with us, who's a major stakeholder in it, but also vice versa, perhaps us exerting an opinion without consulting with them could be, taken against being a good partner. And I was just wondering where we are with them.
They haven't had a meeting because of COVID for a long time now. We kept up to date a bit, and at least none that I've been invited to, and I know I'm on the mailing list. So I guess we have a bit competing interest, though. The Landowners Association is more for recreational purposes, and for the town, it's more for a water source. So we just got to keep that in mind too, that I think it's important that we go together, although we're at the last hour to do it right now. But I think we've got to get together as a committee and make sure we have as much unified voice as we can. But bringing different things to the table may make our position seem weaker if we're just trying to tag team without having scientific facts behind us or stating our real reason why it's not in the best interest or it is in the best interest of the town to support this project.
Your worship, if I may.
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. I think that this issue here is something that should be held over to the next council. It's more than just constructing a couple or drilling a couple of wells. They're talking about constructing 2 access roads. They're talking about clearing brush. They're talking about a number of things. And the people in the area are the ones that are going to be impacted the most. And I would be, a little bit apprehensive about this council in its dying days during the lame duck period to make any sort of decision that could have some lasting repercussions to what may be future residents of the town of St. Andrews. I think that the next council can review this in a timely fashion. There is no urgency with regards to getting this done right now. They have been waiting for some time. To wait for another month is not really a big problem. So I would urge the council just to table this issue and send it to the next council, which will be in position in less than a month, and let them address this thing.
Thanks, Council.
Your
Anyone
worship,
else comment?
your worship, Councilor Michelle here.
Yep.
A couple of things. I did go to the 2018 presentation at the Bayside Hall, and the big takeaway for me was that it's very little water that is going into these sorts of systems. There's a lot of recirculation. It's very high tech. As Mark said, it's in their best interest to manage the water well. The second thing is that I don't have that slide in front of me, but the historical slide that the fellow Doug presented that from the Stantec report in 2014 goes over all of the different amounts of water. I think Historically, there's been a lot of water being drawn from the watershed, and I think the point that we should be taking away is that this isn't going to exceed what's been done historically, and in fact is just a small thing. To Councillor Grew's point, to set it back another month, they've been working on it for a couple of years. They're not asking for necessarily our approval. If we give them a comment saying, yes, we think you can go ahead with this, they still have to do an environmental impact study, which is an extensive thing that would have to be done. So I don't think we should be putting the brakes on it for another month for a new council. I think there's still lots of process to happen yet, and putting the brakes on it for really no reason, given that they came to us as a courtesy. I think it's courteous to go back and ask them to proceed with this scientific inquiry, and I think they have our best interests at heart. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you. Anyone else? I could have a quick comment because just to reinforce what Mr. Spear had told us early on, just here, that what's likely to happen if we don't say anything back to the Department of the Environment is they're likely to go ahead and make the decision, because it's the Department of the Environment's decision whether they get this exemption to drill these wells. And the question we have to have, do we want to have a say to the Department of the Environment? It's really not Cooks that we're talking to, it's the Department of the Environment, because it's important, in my view, that as this thing unfolds, we might not all be here, but there will be a council here. We want to be continuing to get consulted by the Department of the Environment until whatever happens with local governance reform happens, but we still will always have a Department of the Environment for things like this, and we want to be on the A team with them so that we always get consulted when these kinds of things come up. And so we either have a choice of saying we have no comment, we considered it, we don't want to make a comment, or but if we stand it down for another period of time, they're going to go ahead at Environment and make the decision in any case. So we have our choice. Do we want to be part of the decision or not part of the decision that Environment will make?
Through your worship, I just think that the fact that this is getting presented to us post an election, when we literally on Monday find out the results, people have already voted, for us to have an opinion on it and then not even consulting. I understand the LSDs may have different interests, but I'll tell you one thing: if the LSDs made a recommendation to the province of New Brunswick on something that should happen in St. Andrews without consulting with us, I'd be a little bit offended. So that's kind of where I'm struggling. I want to absolutely help. Like, this is an exciting project to have a facility for that much money, creating jobs just outside of St. Andrews. It's 100% what I'd like. I'm having a hard time going to a meeting in February of 2019 and then basically 7 days before we find out who the next council is, making a major stance on an issue. And I know it may be just testing, but when you're talking about our only water source in the town of St. Andrews, every stance you make is a major stance. And I can just tell you that my phone, since we put that agenda out, has been ringing with people concerned, wanting more information over that. And I've done no consultation with the community on this. So that's where I'm struggling. Again, I hope that the next council can pick this up and approve it, and that everything that's on there is the way it is. But I just feel like we're skipping a major step again, called consultation on the most valuable asset we have in this community. Again, we all know this. We have no alternative to Champlain Lake. We have none. We have none. And to make a major stance with this much thought into it, I got a little bit of a process challenge myself. So.
Okay, anybody else? I just think the summary of it, I just wanted people to understand that Environment can make the decision without us. But we can also write to the Department of the Environment and tell them just exactly what you said, Deputy Mayor, that we want to consult further with people that are affected, and that we don't feel competent between now and next week to say anything other than tell them that the next council will be responding to them, and then hopefully the next council will get this thing settled within a very short period of time, because we again don't want to be, before we know whether there's a problem or not, to be a problem, you know, to cause a difficulty that we don't need to cause. So,
Well, may I speak?
certainly.
And this has probably already been said, but I'm just saying, we do want to be in the loop with the Department of Environment. We want to be aware of what's going on and everything like that. And this Cooke's is a reputable company and everything like that. But the real thing is, we always as a town have to protect our interest in Champlain Lake because of it being the town's water supply. And I think that as town fathers and mothers, we need to make sure that we are going to be able to do that. And I think it sounds like the statistics that they gave, there's plenty of water there, but we want to make sure that we always have enough water for our town. And that's my main point here, because we don't have wells within town that we can, as a backdrop, in case anything happened to the lake water or whatever, we have to make sure that we always have water for our citizens. So that's just where I am. And it is an unfortunate period right here, right now, because we won't know for another few days who's going to be on council and who isn't, and all that sort of information. But I guess basically, if we made a comment, we would say we don't feel comfortable in commenting right at this point, but in a few more days, when the new council is in place and the new mayor is in place, then they will look at this and they will say, okay, here's our stance on this particular issue. That's just the way I feel about it.
Your worship, may I speak?
Yeah, certainly, Councillor Ackerman.
I tend to agree with the deputy mayor. This is our only water source, but I think the LSD members need to be contacted. It was 2 years ago in 2019 when they met. It's now 2021. They should be given a voice. And I agree that it is our only source of water. We need to have an opinion. So I think we should still be in the loop. But I think they need to be consulted about it being in their backyard. And if they haven't all agreed, then we are making decisions for the LSDs, which we shouldn't be doing as of right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ackerman. Anybody else? Mr. Spear, what kind of a letter should we write, or what kind of a response should we give?
Councillor Harrison's raised his hand a couple times. Yeah.
Councillor Harrison's
no,
great.
it's okay, because really I'm just reiterating what people have said a bit, that the safety of our water is obviously paramount here, because we won't have much of a community left if we don't have anything to drink.
Yeah.
But and I think so I think we'd have to put that in any letter. I don't think that's going to be a controversial opinion. But and also that the communication should be ongoing, and our consultations, or however you want to phrase it, really should include us at every stage. So even if we don't get back to them specifically on what they're asking now, because we don't feel as an Oakwood Council we should, that shouldn't be a bar from us participating in the future in any way. But I guess as well, just tell them that the new council will get back to you shortly. And that would be the most fair way to do it, and allow them to respond, which I don't know how big a response they'll have that's different than just saying, whatever you do, don't mess with our water supply, and follow all the regulations, blah, blah, blah. But So it might not be that different than what we would tell them, but I think they should at least have an opportunity to make whatever statement they want to make. So,
Councillor Harrison just wrote the letter, your worship.
I know.
Yeah.
Send it down to town hall. We'll put it on stationery.
will do.
Just to clarify, your worship, the exemption was already granted, right? Am I clear? Or am I right? The exemption was already granted and we've been asked for a comment. So either we can make no comment or we can say that we'd like to be a partner moving forward. And there still has to be an environmental impact study, which would involve consultations, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know why we would put the brakes on it. Whether it's this council or the next council, we want to be a partner in this. And I don't think putting the brakes on something that we've been asked to comment on when the decision's already been made is necessarily earning us a good spot at the table, to your point, your worship. Thank you.
No, thank you, Councilor Michelle, but I think I've interpreted this just a little bit differently than that. They got the exemption for the first 2 wells and they did it. They didn't get enough water. They had to get another exemption for the next 5 wells. That's the way I interpret it. The other thing we have to remember too is although the first 2 wells are down by the St. Croix River where they're going to build their plant, their structure, the other 5 wells are quite a distance away from there, and they're on the other side of 127, and they're not within sight, but much closer to Champlain Lake than the 2 original wells.
But they're Mr. Sorensen said they're separate from Champlain Lake. It's an aquifer. Anyhow, it seems to me that
No, they are separate. Yeah, I understand that, but it's also a matter of perception for people that are looking in. I mean, there are also neighbors now. When they used the term neighbors in one of their comments, and then they corrected that and said properties nearby, which they could be woodlots, but we don't know whether there are actually residential wells in that area that are close in anyway. But I don't think we wouldn't be going through this if they'd already granted the exemption. They'd be drilling their wells, their 5 wells.
I think they came to us as a courtesy, if I'm not mistaken.
It's important.
I think the last correspondence I had so to go back, RDC drilled these wells a long time ago, and now they're looking for permission to use them. And I think that is being held up from my understanding with correspondence from the province.
Just to clarify then, so we're not whatever we decide tonight, it's not a done deal that they're going to drill the wells or not drill the wells. This is kind of it's a little bit of window dressing, I think.
And just to reiterate, our position isn't no. It's not. It's that literally we're in lame duck mode, and the election's already happened. In a week, a new council who's probably watching this right now and just as engaged as everybody around this table is on it, is going to have their own opinion that we all hope to be a team made of, right? With exception of Councillor Harrison. Who wrote the letter?
Yeah, that's why he gets that job.
Yeah.
So, Your Worship, I guess on behalf of staff, we have what council would like to reply back to is a very neutral. Won't use the word table because it's not by motion, but that we'd like to defer to the next council just in light of the lame duck period.
Right. Worship, if I could add on, would it be possible for staff to arrange in the meantime between this lame duck period for them to actually reach out to the Champlain Watershed Landowners Association and maybe set up a Zoom meeting with them to have some dialogue about this, just so that way the next council isn't going to ask for this. At least they'll have a little, like, staff could potentially meet with them, or one of us that happens to be on the next council. I'm just wondering if we could keep the ball rolling so we're not delaying it when the new council comes in. Food for thought.
Also, if you could add to that, if the CAO could add to that more information on what is involved in an environmental impact study or assessment, laying that out for the new council so that everybody's clear on all the different steps that have to go through in that large process. Thank you.
Okay. Everybody okay now with that? Thanks, Council. Let's move on to the New Brunswick Green Paper. And Mr. Spear provided us with its kind of summary and thoughts on that. Maybe you could speak to that just a little bit, Chris.
Thank you, Worship. Pull it out again. I guess the first thing I'd like to remind council that these are my own personal opinions, and as to, you know, to what I think is best for the town and under the circumstances. But it's open for debate. It's trying to lay out the green paper. It's a long and wordy document and wasn't real specific. So I thought it gives you, I tried to narrow it down so you understood what each of the things meant. So as you know, the process for legislation for this reform is three parts. Is the green paper is kind of the high end conceptual, what you think is a good idea. Then the government forms a white paper, which is kind of the framework for the eventual legislation. So right now they've kind of listed what they think are the best ideas or what are the issues, and for the community, being the whole province, to comment on it. The big thing that everyone knows, there are 340 local government entities in the province. That includes town, villages, cities, and the biggest ones are there's 236 LSDs, which are unincorporated country folk. So it's no council, no representation, no staff to carry out orders. And a lot of places, and for instance, Nova Scotia, it's all incorporated of some sort of council so that everyone has a say of what's going on. In New Brunswick, 30% of the population is not represented on any type of local government. So they've talked about 4 pillars, and they've actually, I think it's this week, you've probably seen correspondence where they have 2 different nights where they're talking about each pillar, kind of as a wide open with the minister. So if you have a chance to tune into that, I'd recommend it. So the first one is on restructuring, and I'm going to cut this really short so we're not here for the rest of the night listening to me. But one is focusing and recognizing service hubs. So a service hub could mean everything from Charlotte County being one service community, with St. Stephen being the service hub, and in a really grand scale, St. John could be the service hub for all of southern New Brunswick. They also talk about create rural, regional, local governments. That's a bit of a potential for St. Andrews, but it's more unlikely. It's meant for the combination of LSDs and smaller towns and villages. So, for instance, in our partners in Eastern Charlotte, it could be Blacks Harbor becomes a rural municipality with Penfield, for instance, is what that's really talking about. They could also restructure the province into regional municipalities. That's again, talking more of the super cities as opposed to rural. The part D is the one that kind of mirrors the Finn report. So for those on council are aware of it, but back in, I think it was 2008, Commissioner Finn wrote a report about what local government should look like. And so it's establishing newer configured local government entities. And for Charlotte County, what those essentially would look like is the school boundaries that we talk about. So anybody that basically goes to Sir John Dunn Academy from the highway up would be potentially part of a local government out of St. Andrews. St. Stephen would go, you know, up as far as St. Patrick, and then the St. George, Blacks Harbor could be one municipality. That's for the town of St. Andrews. This council especially has talked about that being the possibility that they think makes the most sense, because you're combining people, you know, whether or not they live inside or outside the municipal limits. They're using our services, their friends, our relatives, cooperation, even going back to our earlier discussion that they're, you know, our partners at the Champlain Watershed. So it's just makes sense that we're already connected as a community that way anyway. So it's just making it more official by giving them a seat at a council table. And that then we could extend our services out into those areas. Another form is that they said they could combine local service districts into their own local government entities. The only problem with that is most of them are so small that they may not have any staff. So either it's going to be very large geographical area, so they have enough of a budget in order to hire staff, or it's just still going to be so small on a budget scale that they won't be able to do much. That'll still be getting most of their money from Fredericton. Then they also talk about establish a regional form of local governance for the LSDs through the service commissions. So kind of like before, that the LSDs combined into different municipalities, but then the service commission looks after them. And then their final thing, which they talk about in all the pillars, is that the design service level benchmarks for locally and or regionally provided services. And so it talks about at the introduction to the report that levels of service vary from the province, from the most southern point to the most northern and east and west. And for instance, maybe policing, that policing in Charlotte County might be a 15-minute response time. In some other more remote area, it might be 45 minutes, or firefighters is, I guess, what was especially mentioned in the reports, that there's no level of benchmarking done with fire services. And so it's all over the place. I mean, we even know locally we're lucky in St. Andrews, and this council has invested in equipment and stuff, so we've got a good volunteer department. But some of our members in Charlotte County are little 1 or 2 truck sheds that don't have many volunteers, and the equipment could be 2 or 3 decades old. So it means their response times are more or less relying on the local towns to provide them than what they're able to run for their own. So they're looking to somehow benchmark that across the province. So equal services for all New Brunswickers. Part 2 is on regional collaboration. I won't go through all the things, but essentially what it talks about is establishing the the Regional Service Commission as a new level of government, or an enhanced level of government. There's some good things there, but I guess within my summary of it was, the further we go up the scale and centralize services there, it might make sense financially, but you do lose local control over it. So they have to be weighed out. But something that's worked fantastic for us, of course, is the dump services or the solid waste. We certainly are glad not to have a dump at the end of Indian Point anymore. And it's that type of thing. It's extremely expensive to run and maintain, and so it makes sense to do that. Another is planning services, that I think most of us agree that the planners have added an enhanced level of service we couldn't get on our own, but as a shared service. The recreation we're looking at, but they'd even take that further, talking about possibly regional police, regional firefighting, and a whole bunch of other things. But again, this is just a very conceptual concept, asking New Brunswickers if this is the way they want to go. Land use planning, I won't get too deep into that either, but what they're looking at is the same thing as I talked about before, that St. Andrews has an enhanced, and we've gone through the municipal plan rezoning or zoning bylaw and the secondary municipal plan, which has provided us staff a lot of tools in the community, a chance to being involved in creating a vision for the community. But as you can imagine, that the Community Planning Act still allows the municipalities to decide what's in their best interest. And so they could hire just someone local without planning experience to be their developer, who may not have the tools, the knowledge, and especially not the training that's related to the gentleman we use out of St. Stephen. And so that particular level of planning is all over the place. But even more specifically, back to the LSDs, some of them have rural plans, a lot of them don't. So some municipalities, you could have 2 or 3 homes, and then someone could say, I want to put in a gravel pit or a large industrial use of some kind. And because there's no rural plan that delineates what land can be used for what, that could go in without much opposition, legal opposition. So they're trying to overcome stuff like that. Pillar 4 is on financing. And for those that have read the green paper, you can certainly see that the provincial government says that they have their issues in releasing some of the property taxes, because they use it, I think in their words, for important core services like healthcare and education, which isn't typically what property taxes are supposed to be used for. But New Brunswick and our small population, that's what it's gone. One thing they've talked about, whether they can lower the residential tax or the non-owner occupied residential taxes on properties, which in St. Andrews would help a lot of our residents who, this is their secondary home. So I think it's $1.50 they're paying on top of our mill rate. So it could literally cut their bill more than half. That money would all come out of the province. province's hands, but again, as we know, they're not showing huge surpluses, so they'd probably be considering downloading services would be a concern if they're reducing their tax that they're collecting at the local level. One thing they also said they could do is maybe reduce it, and that we share, that the town would share in some of the taxes, but they'd be able to get some of them too. They also talk about transfer tax room from provincial to local governments. Per the dialogue, they really hated that idea. There's no doubt about it. But the essence would be that they'd take less so we could take more. One thing that stirs a lot of interest, I think, among us is local flexibility and rates and classifications. So I've been doing this for 16 years and I understand the mill rate and I understand some of the basic rates, but then when you get into classifications and rental properties and when you have mixed use properties, not like mixed use in the zoning, but mixed use where they have businesses and part of it and stuff, it gets really complicated on how those rules work and how the property taxes are calculated. And I think it'd be important for council to have more of a say in that. And sometimes across the province too, in the name of economic development, the province lowers property taxes, but sometimes the municipalities, well, not sometimes, most times the municipalities aren't made aware. And then it affects their warrant going into the next year. And so we'd like to have some more flexibility in that stuff. Not that it was never a bad idea or was needed, but at least the municipalities would have the availability to discuss it out. One other item, they said ensure all property types in the local service districts contribute to the cost of local roads through property taxation. And so from what I understand right now, what we call designated highways in the town, like Route 127, is mostly paid for by the province. And while we maintain our streets, the LSDs actually don't contribute to the full cost of their streets. And so it'd be looking for them to pay more. And like the example we use is even in town, some of the woodlots have a very low value on them, which is probably not reflective of even what the market price is, especially in today's market. And so if they, even increased those woodlots to that type of value, they'd get more taxes to be able to provide the services, and that the LSDs would be carrying their fair share. And then their last point on that was to improve the use of technology and information sharing to make the system simpler and clear. I think that's always a good thing. Some of it's already being put in place, I think, but they're kind of not leaving you a little foggy in what that means in the end. So it just is a statement of we want to make it easier. And if you know how we could do that, please let us know type of statement. So, but again, I'd agree that democratically, that's a good idea. And for efficiencies, it's a really good idea. And one thing something I know that already exists, we don't necessarily, well, it does exist now. So within the Regional Service Commission, they started oh, I'm frozen. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. My screen's frozen. So the Regional Service Commission is starting to map every property in St.
We lost you.
We lost you.
Went to mute, actually.
You went on
Sorry, I go, for some reason, my computer turns out when I start to talk too long. I think the mayor's got a button over at his apartment or something. No, just the last thing. They've created a link that all of Charlotte County is now have some zoning maps for a lot of the municipalities and some of the things that have gone on. So even now, hypothetically, I can go into the zoning commission or the service commission's website and look at the zones in St. Andrews, but then I can also see St. Stephen and stuff. And it's really a centralized base of all that information, which is a good thing. And as time goes on, we'll be able to put things like building permits, development agreements, and all that stuff that ties into the PIDs. And that's a fantastic use of technology. And so you have a complete history of everything that went on in that property from the local government level. So in a real quick 5-minute speech or a little bit more, that was essentially what is before you, council. And so there's really two things. One, I'll say that I think regardless if council wants to put it together as a group or individually, vitally important, most of you have been at this table for 5 years or longer, that you should take the time between now and the end of June to submit a report on what you think is in the best interest of, not even say specifically St. Andrews, if you want to do both St. Andrews and New Brunswick, but I think we've, when I go to write, I'm going to talk specifically St. Andrews and Charlotte County. And number two is if you'd like us on behalf of council to submit a report on behalf of the municipality, we'd certainly be glad to do that in your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. Council, anybody else want to comment right now?
Yeah, I will, your worship.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you look at the green paper and the summary that Mr. Spear gave to us, as well as the paper copy, put a significant amount of time into it and a lot of thought into it. So I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciated that, because it was a really good read to get into your summary. So thank you for that. I guess for myself personally, it's very similar to the last issue. We make a big stance now. Next council's in Monday. They're the ones that if the media picks it up, they're the ones that are going to get all the feedback, everything like that. What I got from the Union of Municipalities meeting is that I was under the impression that everybody was encouraged on their own to go and submit their opinion. I know personally myself, I'm going to be submitting what I feel is best, but I just don't think that I Googled it again today to see if any municipalities have gone out and made this big stance. And I saw mayors did, and I couldn't find anything where this municipality said this is exactly what you need to do. So I don't know why St. Andrews would be the poster child for that. I think we should each individually sign our own names. Feel free to say you represent the town of St. Andrews as a councillor, as a deputy mayor or mayor, but you're submitting this personally on your own behalf. I think that that's the way to go. I don't think that we need to be the poster child and turn neighbor versus neighbor. The only comment I'll personally have on this, since we're all probably going to weigh in, is I think if the province is going to make this a voluntary activity, I don't think it's going to be successful. Because if I lived in the LSDs, although voting is extremely important, you do have an opportunity to vote for your federal and provincial representative. The ability to vote for a municipal representative, to most of the people that I talk to at the LSDs, does not outweigh the risk to them of seeing taxes go up and other things. So if this is a voluntary exercise, there's not going to be anything, at least in the peninsula, that I can see coming out of that. And that speaks for both sides. They would agree the same way. So yeah, that's my only comments, but I think it should be an individual exercise. I don't think the town of St. Andrews needs to officially have a stance on that, especially when I haven't seen any other official stance by any other community in New Brunswick.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment?
Yeah, Councillor Grew, your worship.
Yeah, Councillor Grew, sorry.
The mayor hit your mute button, Councillor Grew.
Sorry about that. I've got two Zoom meetings on the go at the same time right now. I'm actually on the Zoom meeting with the Minister of Local Government on the French Zoom meeting, and it's very telling. Is they have a whole bunch of people there, and they spent about 5 to 10 minutes laying down the ground rules, and they said, "Okay, everyone, you have 2 minutes to make your comment." So the decision has probably been made. But nonetheless, I have reviewed the green paper extensively. I've got 19 recommendations I'm putting forward. And I have taken an approach that is province-wide, not St. Andrews specific, because this is a provincial initiative. It's not a St. Andrews initiative. It's going to affect everyone in the province. And I would encourage everyone to look at this from a provincial standpoint, not a St. Andrews only standpoint. And a couple of things that I've encouraged the government to do, and I won't get into detail because we could be here forever. And number one is it would be really nice if the province made a commitment right now that they would circulate the white paper for comments before they went straight to legislation. Because right now the green paper is very non-specific, doesn't go into a lot of details, and it could be anything. The white paper hopefully will be more specific, and hopefully we'll have a chance to comment on that. Other things and Mr. Spear pointed out, and I thank Mr. Spear for his input, it was very useful, is that the province of New Brunswick is the only jurisdiction that uses provincial property tax to fund provincial areas of responsibility. And it's high time the province gets out of the provincial property tax game and allows the municipalities to use property taxes for what they were intended, is the delivery of services to the residents, to the properties. Right now, and that includes the business taxes. The province has other vehicles that they can use for taxation. They could use income tax, they could raise the HST, they could use the liquor taxes. They've got all kinds of different taxes they could use to fund these programs. And there's no reason for them to be in the property taxation game. The other thing that I'm looking at is that one way that municipalities, well, I'll just finish with the final three ones, which is on the finance side, is one way is allow municipalities to set property tax rates, different property tax rates for non-residential properties, so that we can set a tax rate for a business, a hotel, or a restaurant at different rates, or an industrial facility at different rates. There's no reason why they should be tied to the residential rate, because they're different uses. The other one is the provincial government could very easily eliminate all provincial taxes on municipal properties. There's no reason why the provincial government is taxing our municipal properties, which means they're taking money out of our pockets for the delivery of municipal services. Another one is the province could very easily transfer all of their provincially owned properties within a municipality to the municipality, so that the municipality could develop those properties for housing and for other higher and better uses.
I like that.
Because right now, they're vacant and they sit there and there's nothing done with them. And then finally, as I said before, eliminate all the provincial property taxes and have the province collect that, replace that money with some other form of tax. If you have to impose a business tax, then put in a business tax. If you have to impose some sort of other tax on non-residents, then put in some sort of a tax there, but do not make it a property tax. Because most people feel when it's a property tax that the money is going to the municipality, and that is not the case. So it's a hidden tax. And I think those are areas that the province could really jump in on. And I'll just close with a couple of numbers that I found were extremely, they highlight the whole situation. Is in New Brunswick, we charge businesses 1.5 times the residential rate. On top of that, there's another $2.18 per $100 of assessed value. If you're a business in St. John and your business is valued at $250,000, you're paying property taxes of over $12,000 a year. Another example, and this is, again, I use the number of 250,000, is that on a $250,000 home, the double taxation adds $234 to the monthly rent. And if the rental unit is in St. John, over $600 a month goes to rent, or goes to property tax. So you talk about affordable housing, this property tax is killing it. And then when you want to talk equivalents, if you look at St. John, okay, a non-resident property in St. John pays over $7,000 in property tax. The same $250,000 home in Halifax pays $2,700 in property tax, a difference of $4,500. And New Brunswick is by far the highest, has got the highest property tax in the country. So there's a lot of big issues there that the government has opened the door on with this green paper. And I think that I urge you all to look at the numbers, to look at this thing, make your comments, and hopefully we can get this right this time. Because right now it's just not working and it's not sustainable. So anyway, I've got my comments made. I'm going to be sending those in, and I'll be participating in the town halls that they have planned. And any opportunity I have, I'll put them forward, and I urge you all to do the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Groove.
May I
Anybody else?
say something?
Yes,
Yeah.
certainly.
Listen, the way I look at it, the way COVID housing prices have gone in this town and things like that, you can blame it all on COVID or whatever, but the real thing is, my concern right now is, well, I have a few concerns, but the housing is going to be so high that the local people will not be able to afford to live in this town. And that really concerns me, but there's probably nothing much we can do about it. It's just the nature of how the market has gone. And people that have bought houses here on the pretext, like, you know, a number of years ago or whatever, and thought maybe they could move here or they would like it for their summer home. Now, because of the way the taxes are, it's so expensive that you almost have to liquidate the property in order to bail yourself out of the high tax bill. Like Councillor Grew just said, that we've got the highest property tax in Canada. Is that something we should be proud of? I don't think so, maybe. I really don't. Because it's not fair to your residents, the people who have lived here for years. They're going to probably have to sell their houses. But as in the past, people would have said, well, too bad if they can't afford it, they should just sell their house and move somewhere, you know. But I don't like that idea for the simple reason people have given a lot of service to the community and lived here their whole life. And now we're just saying, well, too bad about you. You know, the taxes are high and, you know, you have a limited income as a senior citizen, whatever. And hey, too bad, you're just going to have to go somewhere else. Thank you. I'm done.
Anyone else? If I might jump in here, are we all in agreement that there will be no joint submission by this council on the green paper, but we will encourage everybody as individuals, not as members of a council, as individuals to continue, as Councillor Groove has already done, put together a presentation if they wish to and send it to the government as a citizen who's concerned about what we're facing here and concerned that if they're going to do reform, they should do it, but they should get it right. Okay, and that's pretty much the message. Okay, folks.
Thank you. Yes.
That's fine. So we know where we're going on that. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Spear, there's one other thing here. Bicycle parking.
Oh, I'm out, guys. Have a good meeting. Good night.
Alrighty. Thank you, Councillor Goumichon.
Good night, Councillor.
This will be a quick one, Your Worship. So the last year about this time, the owners of the King Street Pizza and Quaddy Tours were looking for to create no bicycle parking, or Quaddy Link Marie, sorry, are looking for bicycle parking in front of their premises. Right now, there's some parallel parking there, and so there's, we lose only 3 or 4 spaces. When they brought the request in last year is when we shut off all the parking on Water Street. And so I said, the town isn't interested in reducing our capacity anymore, so I'll hold off and see. And plus they were looking for a little bit of investment from the town, and under the circumstances, we didn't have it, and they understood. So they've asked us to reconsider it for this year. It is going to require some amendments to parking bylaw, which staff agrees you guys really can't do. but we are looking to see any input, what you might think of it. So what would happen from the corner of the, closest to Water Street of the King Street Pizza to the other end of Quadrilink Marine, they'd put in some yellow lines on the ground, and they'd like to put in bike racks to have some bicycle parking in the downtown, which is really good because it's very, very limited. I think we might be the only one in all the downtown, or not much more than us. And then put a couple of benches and essentially maybe a plant or two. And it does really two things. It does increase the bicycle parking. It does open it up for the storefronts. They're about the only ones along that section that have parking in front. And so the rest of them aren't impeded like they are. So as a matter of fairness, it does make some sense to look at that. But we'd like your direction. If you think it's a good idea, then, talk to the owners, because we feel you still, whoever's here and after next Monday, still have views that will represent the next council mostly in this matter.
So would that be for all year round, that would just become indefinitely a bicycle parking place, or just for the summer, for 4 summer months or whatever?
It's a good question. Probably just for most of the year, but it'd be impede snow removal. It's so close to the road. The plows would probably wing that bike rack right through the front window. So we'd ask to have it removed in the winter time, so we can do snow removal operations properly.
Worship.
Yes.
This one's a little bit simpler than the other issues we were talking about. If staff has no objection to it, I think that we should just allow staff to proceed with it. The reality is our municipal plan actually says that we do need to address bicycle parking. So this actually goes hand in hand with our municipal plan as well. So I see no reason to object. And maybe it's a 1-year grant, and the next council, should they have a problem with it, can easily go from there. But this is a minor one compared to the other two issues. So I'm fine with staff recommendation.
Okay, council, everyone.
Your Worship,
Yes.
maybe Mr. Spear could address this. Is this going to require a change to the vehicle bylaw?
Eventually, yes, if we go with this, but it allows us to do a little bit of planning. So we're not asking you to do any amendments to the vehicle bylaw. It'd be a schedule to call it no parking, but it's just to get a flavor, and we can start to order some of the stuff needed. And
So we can't actually action it right now until we put the change to the vehicle bylaw in place.
we're just asking for what your thoughts are on it, so we can
Yeah.
kind of bring it forward as this is what the
It's a
previous council
long-term
kind of thought.
solution.
Yeah.
It's not something for this summer then.
No, we'd like to have it in place this summer, where it's only a one schedule change. Hypothetically, if this council says, they think it's a good idea, we could bring it at the first meeting. The next council says, well, here's what we think. The previous council thought it's not a bad idea. What do you think? And then it's just one reading of the schedule for the vehicle bylaw to increase no parking. We're going to have to make a couple of amendments anyway because of the changes a couple of 3 months ago to the one-way streets. We've got to make an amendment anyway before the end of June. So one way or another, that part of it's going to be addressed.
Okay. So next
Okay.
council.
Everybody okay with that? And let Mr. Spear proceed with that and get it ready for the next council.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Councillor Acquaculture, I think, wants to say something, Your Worship.
Councillor
Wonder, are we losing all the parking sites in front of those two places? Like they'll just be bike racks only and bike parking?
We are, but they parallel park there. It's not front end parking, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
only 2 or 3 cars can go along there, park in parallel anyway. So
So
it's not a lot,
not losing a big amount.
not
Okay.
especially if you're keeping the front street open, Water Street wide open for parking.
Just a
Well, I
quick
wanna-
question, and I don't know if it's been thought of, is I know you're talking in front of the pizza place. Well, there's a lot of people that just pull in and go to pick up their pizza and then drive off again. What do they do if that becomes bicycle parking?
Well, all I can say is it was the pizza place that requested the change. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming they've got that worked out. They'll start throwing them from the window, I guess, right into the back seat. Not sure, but
No, just.
it's quick turnaround. So potentially double parking in the middle of King Street for 2 minutes while they run in, get their pizza and run out would be my honest answer.
I think that's what probably will happen.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Folks,
Thanks,
that's great. I guess
Question
for a
period, Your Worship.
Question period.
Your worship, I do have one person waiting to ask a question to council.
Okay,
Ms. Carney, you have the floor to council. It is question period. If you'd like to ask your question, you can do so now.
Okay, just getting set up. So I think there's a few things that they missed in the presentation that council should be aware of. What they're asking for the hatchery is this is an industrial well that's completely different than a surface water. And the allocation for the tuna plant they were talking about, that was for surface water. An industrial well sets a very dangerous precedent. And I was talking to a few people and that is the case. It would be a very dangerous precedent to allow the first industrial well to take from the Cooke watershed. So they did skirt around that issue. The other issue they skirted around is that there is still a significant lacking of research. They don't have research of the connecting watershed with the Cooke. We know that everything in aquifers is all connected with the lake. So we can't say it's different water, it's all the same water. So I'd like to know, ask more questions about the first comment I made, like the industrial well, ask more questions of what research is out there, what research they're doing for that interconnectedness. They also skirted around the blue-green algae issue, climate change. They have no mention of that. Changes in Cooke. We know the water levels have been going down. We've had issues where we're not allowed to water our lawns in the summer. We're asked not to. The water is so low. So I'm not sure about this. There's so much water there that we have excess water. That doesn't really make sense to the reality that we live in as residents of St. Andrews. The other thing is the stats they were giving. It's 690 for the IGMP for the town of St. Andrews. It's 91 for the hatchery. So that is actually 13% of what the town uses. So the whole amount that the town uses, 690, they want to use another 13%, 91. And it seems to me that the town of St. Andrews needs, that 13% that they want for this one, big industrial complex. We need that for the nursing home. We need it for affordable housing. So to me, 13% of what the town uses is not insignificant. The way they tried to play that up in their research. I think they're also pushing to try to be so fast in that the amalgamation of the districts is coming up. I'm hoping that will give the town of St. Andrews more rights over what we can say of what happens to our only watershed. We are a peninsula. We have nowhere to expand to get water. That is the only direction to get water. And from what Chris Spears was saying, we already don't have enough water for the town and for the developments we want, say at the Huntsman Science Center and whatnot. So how can we, as a town, before drawing more water out of this one area? He also didn't mention there is a small hatchery, a sister part of Cooke's that's at Oak Bay. And I think some of you are probably aware that of this small hatchery, this new hatchery would be, he didn't say what percentage bigger, but like 500% bigger. I don't know. It's much, much larger. But there is adequate water and adequate land at Oak Bay. The reason why they're pushing for the Bayside is because of the wharf. Right now, they transfer fish from Oak Bay by truck to get to the wharves, to get to the pens in the Bay of Fundy. They could continue to do that. They can continue to transfer them by truck. He didn't mention that the reason why they're pushing for Bayside is only because of the wharf access. But part of the reason is that they want to grow the fish bigger. So that's why they want access to a wharf, because it would take more truck runs. They'd have to do more truck runs. So they'd save time by going from the small hatchery to the big hatchery right next door, because it'd be right at the same facility, but then they'd lose time by taking them by more truckloads because the fish are bigger. So it takes more truckloads, but they only do that twice a year. They only take the fish out of the hatcheries twice a year. It's not like they're using the wharf every day at Bayside. They'd only be using it twice a year. So I don't see any reason why it couldn't be somewhere else and not tap into our only water supply. And he didn't really give us any other options. He said Bayside or nothing. You know, they didn't talk about, well, what about Oak Bay? What about St. George? They have hatcheries all over. They have ones in Maine. They have them in Nova Scotia. They have them all over New Brunswick. He gave us no other options. He said Bayside or nothing. And what they're pushing for is the wharf. And he left that completely out of his presentation. So there's a lot of things there that, you know, we need a lot more information. They're just not delving in. He's trying to say it's not a lot of water, but I think 13% of what we use as a town, that's a lot of water.
Okay,
So-
my suggestion would be most of what you brought up, if you want to make that representation to the Department of the Environment, they're the ones that are making the decision. We're not going to be able to change any of, you know, that information. The
I
other
would
thing I
encourage
think-
any citizen that is listening to write to Kathy Baucus, the MLA, and also write to John Williamson, our MP. And if we can get, you know, some more letters out and, you know, with some of this understanding that I just said and, you know, a bit better perspective, if we can get together as a group and put this forward to some of our representatives.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Knopper, is there anyone else?
Your worship, that was our only questions there, or request for questions.
Okay.
Your worship, I know Joanne sent in a message before. If she could, there's a couple new points in there. If she could send them just to the new council and have them when they start, because they're going to be diving into this, I assume, hopefully right away, just so they have the record of her comments.
Yeah, the industrial well concept is a new concept, but it's very, very important to take that seriously, because that industrial well is not going to be part of the old tuna plant allocation of water. So you could have industrial well, you could have 50 industrial wells up there. It's not going to draw from the old allocation.
Thank you. And just one more thing, your worship. I meant to say it earlier, but we have an environmental advisory committee for the town of St. Andrews. I would feel like we were missing a step if we didn't send them this information, the presentation as well. Simply the fact that if I was representing the town of St. Andrews on that, I would think that it would probably come across me to give opinion.
Sure. I think Mr. Knopper can make sure they get that information for sure. I agree with that. That's fine. Good. Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Knopper, if there's no one else on, maybe we can go to Councillor and Deputy Mayor's comments.
Go Bruins.
Anybody want to comment? If nobody else wants to comment, I do have an informational thing that just came in today. I just want to make council aware of this, not to discuss it tonight, because I don't think it would be appropriate to discuss it in an open meeting if we've got to that stage. It's not a confidential thing. As you know, last month, council approved the human resources policies. And part of that was a performance appraisal system that was put in which is contained in that policy. It appeared to me that there was no provision made yet for the performance appraisals for our two senior staff members who are present with us in the meeting here tonight. And so I've been working with our human resources consultant, Sherry DeVoe, and she has put together a performance review system for our two senior people. And all I'm asking you to do, because again, we can't transfer everything to the next council, even if we are a bit of a lame duck council. I think that Mr. Knopper and Mr. Spear deserve to get an appraisal according to the standards that we've already approved in the human resources policy. So would you take a look at this documentation? It'll be provided to you tomorrow. You'll get a hard copy tomorrow. Take a look at it and see what you think of it. And if you feel comfortable in filling it out, then go ahead and fill it out and send it back to me before the end of the week. But I don't want to have a discussion here in an open session of this. You can comment on it when you see it.
Your worship, if I could just add, there is a some language in the CAO duties bylaw or policy that outlines the process for the appraisals.
Right.
And in fact, we've been negligent on that. We should have had them done by the end of
Right.
March.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, there is language there that identifies what the process is, and perhaps you could consult that and see, make sure we're in step with that.
Yeah, but take a look at the format, because I want some input from council, from this council, because we're the ones that have worked with our senior staff for this period of time. So we should be having input into that process. So anyway, get back to me on it. You'll get that probably tomorrow and have a chance to look at the format that's being suggested by our consultant. Okay, great. That's all I have to say. Thank you, council. Here we are, one more meeting.
Thank you, everybody, and best of luck on Monday night.
Tuesday.
And oh, it's right, Tuesday night. I keep doing that. And Councillor Harrison, thank you for attending even when you've made your intentions known, that you still showed up to all these meetings. So
I can't
Lord,
lose
if you-
on Tuesday.
That's right.
you have
Thanks,
a perfect,
everyone.
you have a perfect record.
Yeah. Thank you for the card, by the way, to the staff. It was very nice and appreciated.
You're welcome.
You want to be an honorary council member, Andrew?
Don't they call that counselor at large?
Yeah, I'll watch on Facebook and just put comments in.
You'd be an ex officio.
Yeah.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good night,
Good
folks.
night, everybody.
Your worship, you need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I so move. Let's get out.
Motion to adjourn, Councillor Acquaculture.
Thank you.
How could I forget that?
Good night, everybody.
Good night, all.
Councillor Acquaculture.